Thanks everyone for joining today. We'll wait just a minute or two to let a few more people hop in before we begin, and then we'll get right into our session. Thank you. We see more and more people joining in, so wait a minute.
Think we're good to get started, Samit?
Yep. All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Power Talks, a 30-minute session where our Power Fleet experts share industry insights for 20 minutes, followed by your questions in an open Q&A session. Before we get started, for anyone who would like live translation or captions, we are using Wordly for today's session. You can follow along in your preferred language of choice directly from your phone or another device. Here's how to set it up. It only takes a few seconds. Scan the QR code provided on the slide, choose your language of preference, and click Attend. We recommend to mute your desktop to read the live translation on your device without any distractions. Feel free to use a headset if you'd like. Next slide, please. Hello and welcome to Power Talks, PowerFleet's new webinar series dedicating to helping you run safer, smarter, and more efficient on-site operations. Wherever you are joining us from across our global network, we appreciate you taking the time to be here. Today's session focuses on a challenge that affects every organization: wasted productivity. Hidden drains like idle equipment, misaligned labor, and fragmented metrics cost companies millions each year. In this webinar, we'll explore why traditional KPIs fall short, how smarter on-site metrics unlock measurable ROI, and what leading companies are doing today to turn visibility into savings. Next slide, please. Thank you. Before we begin, let's quickly run through a few points so you know what to expect. As I mentioned earlier, today's session will run for 30 minutes. If you have questions at any time, please type them into the Q&A panel and we will address them during the 10-minute Q&A at the end. We'll also be running a couple of quick polls during the session so we can hear from you directly. So please take a moment to participate when they appear. We are recording today's session and the link will be sent to you afterwards so you can review the content or pass it along to your colleagues who couldn't join us. With us today are Scott Walker, VP of Supply Chain Product Management here at PowerFleet. Scott has a long career helping global organizations tackle supply chain and operational challenges, with a focus on making data actionable for measurable business impact. At PowerFleet, he leads our supply chain product strategy, building solutions that help enterprises improve efficiency, reduce costs, and create real value from smarter data. Joining Scott is Bert Parizo, Director of Customer Engagement. Bert works closely with customers across industries, helping them deploy and maximize PowerFleet solutions to solve their most pressing operational challenges. He brings deep expertise in turning complex operational data into clear insights that drive both productivity and ROI. Between Scott and Bert, we partner with hundreds of enterprises worldwide, seeing firsthand what works and where traditional approaches fall short. That's exactly what we'll explore with you today. In the next 20 minutes, we'll dive into the hidden drains of warehouse productivity. We'll show why the way performance is usually measured leaves money on the floor, and how smarter metrics can turn those inefficiencies into millions in savings, while still keeping safety a very top priority. I'll now be handing over to our talented subject matter experts. Today, Bert's presenting from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Scott presenting from New Jersey. Over to you now, Bert.
Thank you, Sumit. Next slide, please. So our story starts with a case study that we completed with one of the world's largest food and beverage companies. They had a network of nearly 100 facilities and operated over 2,500 assets across all of these different facilities. The labor cost to run these assets cost more than $150 million every year. They had successfully leveraged PowerFleet safety technology, but the inefficiencies on the warehouse floor were still costing them millions. Next slide, please. They were able to see a clear pattern as they dug deeper into the data. Operators were still being paid while they were sitting idle on their forklifts. The forklift activity did not always match the pallet moves that were happening within the facility. And asset impacts led to facility rework, damaged pallets, and unnecessary delays. While they weren't able to see these issues at each individual site, they added up to millions in lost productivity across their entire network. Next slide, please. Let's bring this back to you. What do you see as the biggest productivity drain in your operations? Is it labor inefficiency, idle equipment, inconsistent operator performance, or damage and rework? Select the one that fits you best, or choose other if your challenges look different than these items.
Looks like the responses are piling in a little bit.
A little bit, yep.
It's good. Always good to hear from you what your challenges are. Looks like the consensus is on labor inefficiency, Bert.
Yep.
Yep. Don't be afraid to add some of the other if you have something not on our list.
In the chat. Yep. Yeah. So it looks like labor inefficiency and idle equipment, which are somewhat related, and then operator variability coming in as well.
Great. Well, thank you for those responses. We'll keep monitoring them even after. So if you're a little behind and you just want to get your feedback in, it's much appreciated. And thanks, Bert, for talking through that customer case study.
Yep.
The issues we saw there are really not limited to one company, right? Across the industry, productivity is under pressure for the same reasons at every other company that we see. And so you might wonder why it's so hard for companies to influence their efficiency. And I think it comes down to a few things. First is automation. It's on its own, it's not a silver bullet. Without skilled teams and strong, repeatable processes, like the full benefits of automation just don't materialize very well. And second, geopolitical shifts and global disruptions are reshaping supply chains. So it's forcing, rapid changes in facility footprints, workforce demands, and operational models. And then thirdly, and maybe the most important, is the problem of fragmented systems and siloed data. So the leaders of these companies are drowning in information, but they can't see the full picture. McKinsey found that companies with visibility gaps face 30% higher inventory costs and up to 24% longer fulfillment times than those with strong visibility solutions. So, all these forces together are making productivity even harder to sustain, and they highlight why resilience has become really a baseline for operations. And the pressures that we discuss show up in hard numbers as well. 65% of organizations say they can't hire fast enough to keep up with changing skill requirements. Nearly 80% expect to manage multiple sites in just a few years, which multiplies their complexity of operation. And Toyota research has shown us that the inefficient forklift usage alone can cut throughput by as much as 30%. And these forces make productivity very hard to sustain. So, resilience in this space is no longer optional. It's really just the baseline of getting good operations. What we see across the industry is that the way productivity is measured simply doesn't go far enough today. Utilization can be monitored, for example, but it's often tracked in a simple on-off. And if equipment movement, a forklift moving doesn't necessarily mean that it's moving productively. It doesn't mean it's moving pallets or creating any sort of extra value. It could just be driving around. And labor hours are clocked, but that doesn't tell you how productive those hours are really being utilized. So on top of that, every site tends to define and report metrics differently. So in an enterprise of multiple sites, it makes it very difficult or nearly impossible to compare performance from across the network in any sort of fair way. Most of the KPIs that leaders get are backward looking as well. They show you what already happened after the costs have been incurred, and it doesn't really help the manager act in the moment to try to offset those costs or offset that inefficiency. And then there's blind spots, idle assets that look busy on paper or wasted labor that goes totally unnoticed. So these gaps all add up to real money left on the floor, and they're exactly why traditional approaches to measurement continue to fall short. So when we talk about traditional KPIs, they give us often fragmented data. Forklift hours in one bucket, labor hours in another, output rates. But really, productivity comes from seeing the big picture of them together. So when we combine 3 dimensions, we could talk about a few different things. First is asset utilization, how effectively your people and equipment are really being put to work, and where those resources are idle or misaligned. And that misalignment piece is key, because it could be that there's people on shift that just don't have jobs to do, or it could be that the people have jobs to do and they're not getting them done. Secondly is operations efficiency, whether your process is consistently meet your throughput targets or whether there's waste designed in to the solution. And then thirdly is operational agility, how quickly and decisively your team responds when things don't go as planned, whether it's a staffing shortage or a system breakdown of some kind. So measuring across all these 3 dimensions gives leaders a true unified view, and it replaces fragmented snapshots with comparable benchmarks, not only at single sites, but across the entire enterprise and fleet. And most importantly, it transforms that visibility into actionable data. So now we look at what this unified measurement means in practice. So the first step is really optimizing the equipment so throughput is maximized and it reduces costs and idle time is uncovered. This scenario shows how organizations can surface bottlenecks and inefficiencies across their sites. By combining utilization data with operational flow, leaders can actually see where equipment is underutilized, where the delays are occurring, and where throughput can be improved. With this insight, they can really reallocate resources, remove inefficiencies, and enhance productivity across their entire network. Second step is really optimizing more than just one site, but real impact comes when you scale that across your entire enterprise. So even as new sites come online, you're able to effectively, from the start, use these tool sets to get a higher level of performance. This scenario here illustrates how easily it can be to bring on new sites, equipment, and systems in a single unified view. Even when each site operates differently, the data flows seamlessly into a single dashboard. This enables consistent benchmarking, faster risk detection, and the ability to adapt quickly when disruptions and new requirements come up. Slide. And then the third piece we like to look at is once all the sites are connected, you get power from having all the performance data in one place, like in a single view. So instead of fragmented snapshots, leaders can see performance across their entire network in a single pane of glass. This helps those sites get compared and identify those risks and drive consistent performance improvement throughout the business. So we're going to launch another poll here and try to identify which of these practices you already have in place at your sites. So, the things we've come up with are tracking forklift utilization, whether or not you already have metrics for that, measuring labor hours and productivity, using site-specific KPIs that may or may not be standardized across all your sites, integrating labor, equipment, and processes, all those data into a single view, or potentially something else. Or maybe there's nothing that you have in place that matches these, and you're doing it in a completely different way. So I'm just trying to see the responses. Looks like there's a dead heat going on right now between tracking forklift utilization and measuring labor hours and productivity. So at least some of you are investing in these sort of measures today at some level. And then, right beyond that tier, it appears that there's kind of an even between using site level KPIs and having none of these options at all. So it's pretty interesting information. Any thoughts, Bert?
Yeah, very interesting breakdown across kind of a lot of the options outside of the integrating the consolidated view across the three that we're talking about today. So.
And it's not super surprising that sort of tracking utilization is up there, right? Because we're probably 20 years into the technology of people outfitting, mobile equipment with basic tracking devices. So it's not surprising that that's at the top of the list.
Sure. Absolutely.
So we'll transition back to you, Bert, for a few more slides.
Sounds good. Thank you, Scott. So as we return back to our customer story here, the turning point for this company came when they were able to combine the labor data from Kronos along with the warehouse data from SAP into PowerFleet's enterprise dashboards. This combined data revealed some hidden drains that they weren't able to see previously. There were forklifts idling during shifts. They had some pallet moves that weren't aligned with the forklift activity, and they had a significant amount of costly rework from damage and impacts. These unified metrics enabled leadership to balance the productivity, safety, and efficiency in an equitable way across the network. They were able to implement some new on-site discipline. They were able to recognize and reward high performers, and then also identify the low performers and give them training and coaching that help them to improve and work to become high performers. The results this company saw speak for themselves. They had an 85% reduction in accident and damage costs. They had 100% compliance with safety requirements and $2 million in annual savings. It wasn't just the financial savings that they were able to achieve. They also created a stronger safety culture and a new way to manage productivity. As we close, here are 4 key takeaways to remember from the session today. First, unified visibility drives clarity. Connecting the labor, equipment, and operational data into one view allows companies to remove blind spots and finally get a shared source of truth across the entire network. Second, actionable metrics improve decisions. It's not enough just to have the data. Being able to use the data and create comparable benchmarks across sites, turn that data into insights that guide incentives, retention, and performance improvement. And third, productivity needs to be measured in balance. Utilization, efficiency, and agility all work together. Looking at only one metric in a silo creates a distorted view of the site's performance. And finally, this framework delivers results. PowerFleet customers see measurable ROI by reducing costs, improving throughput, and building a culture of accountability that sustains performance over time. Before we wrap up this session, we want to hear from you. If you have any questions about what we've covered, feel free to ask them now. We're also here to continue the conversation after the webinar to explore how Powerfleet can help you improve productivity, cut hidden costs, and maximize efficiency. That'll hand it back to you, Sumit.
Thank you, Bert, and thank you, Scott, for those great insights. For everyone here with us today, go ahead and drop your questions in the Q&A panel. We'll try and make sure to get as many as we can. So feel free to drop in your questions and I'll read them out. So we have one question right in the Q&A panel. Our sites use different KPIs and reporting tools. How realistic is it to unify those metrics across multiple facilities or even regions? Scott, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. It's very achievable when we've seen companies achieve it. It's important to have success at that, to really understand and put a little bit of thought into what those KPIs are that are meaningful for you, and to also understand that across an enterprise, it's not necessarily that every facility is going to act the same and have the same performance level metrics, but they would typically be covered by the same type of KPIs. So one site might have a higher throughput on cross-docking versus another site might be more about pick and pack. And so building those in the right way, you could still have enterprise-wide level KPIs that combine information from either WMS, LMS, ERP type systems with utilization and other tracking metrics to really create a fair and balanced way to evaluate your entire enterprise, understanding that there are some different operating principles.
Thank you, Scott. Very insightful. I have another question coming in from another Scott. How quickly do you usually start to notice real savings after rolling this out? Sounds like this is a question for Bert.
Yep, sounds good. So yeah, the immediate gains that we typically see are not initially savings, but more around employee behavior, and that ties really to reducing the damage and the risks that are being run in the facility, in addition to some productivity improvements. Measurable savings can typically take a quarter or two to materialize, and we generally see a full ROI on the initiative in 6 to 12 months. We see that in reductions in downtime, reductions in damage, and reductions in maintenance costs. So as we progress through the program, the data continues to drive savings as we increase productivity and utilization.
Thanks,
Hey,
Bert.
Sumit, I just noticed that there was a question in the chat as well, not just in the Q&A. So I'll just read that one real quick and we'll address that one as well. It says, how does the forklift pre-trip work with the system? So it's a good question. We did talk about operational efficiencies and the way that you can identify that. We didn't touch too much upon risk avoidance or risk minimization, which is something we focus pretty heavily on at PowerFleet as well. So there is a whole built-in pre-use inspection system, and it's very flexible to meet the needs of the client that needs it. So we can do things like we can immobilize equipment before inspections are completed, and you could decide is that once a shift or once a day or once every time the driver changes. So it's very flexible in that manner. We automate that process for them and collect the data in real time. And then we can also integrate that. We talked about a lot of integrations with Unity, and we integrate that with outside systems like maintenance systems so that we can automatically generate work orders based on certain types of responses that may be concerning, and immobilizing equipment and sending real-time messages out to maintenance staff. And so it's pretty flexible, and it's repeatable across all your environments.
Thanks, Scott, and thank you for catching that question in the chat section. I have one more question coming in here. How do you get frontline teams to buy into tracking performance metrics instead of feeling monitored?
I'll take that one as well if you want.
Yeah, go for it, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the keys to getting buy-in is making sure that you're super transparent before the technologies and the processes are put in place with the teams, so they're getting used to it before it actually takes on. It's also important to have flexibility in systems where you could start collecting and tracking data and socializing it before you actually act upon it. So that starts to let people know what their tendencies are before you start using it for corrective actions. And third is wherever possible, you want to use the information in the top performers to create incentive programs and make them feel happy that the analysis is taking place because it's creating a reward system for them in any way, shape, or form you can, whether that's letting them pick better shifts or using their favorite vehicle for a week or, whatever that happens to be.
Thank you, Scott. Um, we're at time, but I'll have one more question. When you say you're using the information from SAP and Powerfleet in one centralized dashboard, where is this information being integrated? Through the Powerfleet dashboard. Very intense. Who wants to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I could do that. I mean, so the integrations are kind of bi-directional, right? So there's a couple things that we do. So we bring data into our system and we have tool sets built on the platform that let you compare that data, whether that's if it's SAP is a big company, right? So it could be as simple as people data, and you're using SAP as your centralized source of truth for who the drivers are, when their certifications happened, what their IDs are, and that's automatically feeding in and delivering right to the forklifts and saying these are the people that should drive and when and where. That's one aspect, or the other aspect of could be like time clock management, and we talked a little bit about it in the slides, where we can put together the dashboards that help you compare. This is we paid for 352 hours of operator drive time last week, but we only got 200 hours of actual drive time, and starting to identify and uncover those inefficiencies. So there is Powerfleet dashboards that we build, depending on what type of data set it is and who you're integrating with.
Thank you, Scott. Great answer. So before we close out today's session, Scott and Bert, I would want to hand it over to you one more time real quick to recap the key takeaways. The main points our audience should walk away with. Anything you'd like to say?
I'll go first.
Sure.
I think the key takeaways that I try to impress upon is that this is all achievable. It doesn't always sound achievable, especially if you're in the weeds in your organization, and you see, you often see where you think you could get benefits, but the tying all the people together to get those benefits can be challenging. And I think we've seen often that it's very achievable. And the unique aspects of what we're talking about here do touch so many different segments of your organization, whether that's the maintenance people, whether that's the operations people, whether that's the safety experts. And when you start to tie all them together, including the IT team who can benefit from, the way we manage the data, you get sort of this unified push towards, yeah, this is a great idea, let's do it and let's make it work. And then it has a much higher success rate than if you're one organization within a company trying to say, this is what I really want, and no one else has bought in.
Thank you, Scott.
Absolutely. That's great. Yeah, and my big takeaways from the discussion is having actionable data. One of the things we talked about earlier is just having the data isn't useful. It's getting it into a format that works across your entire network, across all of your sites, where you can actually take actions on it and compare across all those sites. So that's my big takeaway, is really making sure it's consistent across the network and encapsulates all of the data and gives you something that you can action on. We used to have just, screens of data that people would look at, try to find anomalies. Now, our dashboards allow us to identify those anomalies and give you guidance on where you should be acting without having to sift through all the data that you're collecting on your own.
Thanks, Bert. Great, and thank you for summarizing today's session, Scott and Bert. A big thank you to everyone for joining us today as well. Please feel free to scan the QR code on your screen to stay updated on our upcoming webinars, and hope you all have a great day. Thanks all.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone.